Hi, my name's Sarah from Myosh, and this today's training session is on record notifications, and Catherine Spencer is going to lead us through that. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A panel at the bottom of the Zoom webinar software, and we'll either get to them during the sessions if we can, or at the end we'll keep an eye on them. So thank you for joining us, and over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks everyone for coming along to this morning's session on record notifications. I just want to put a little tiny disclaimer out there that I've just literally had an issue with my laptop. I'm not too sure what the issue was, but it essentially just cuts me out of everything that I'm doing. I'm really hoping that doesn't happen again, but if it does, apologies, and we'll have to rearrange the session. I'm not expecting it to. It should be business as usual now. The objectives of this session are essentially for me to be able to just have a broad overview in the beginning part of the session of how you can create a record notification. And then I would like to actually go through maybe some more specific ones that you don't have set up within your system. Because of the response we've had for this session, I'm thinking that we might also organise maybe a tailored session in a future week's time or so, maybe mid-May onwards. If you do have any questions, as always, you can just pop them into the Q&A bar and we'll address those as we go through the session. So record notifications is accessible via the administration link just down at the bottom of the menu panel, and then you'll see it's available just on the tab across the top as we're in right now. Now, one thing to be aware of is that this access is typically restricted, and it depends upon your setup, but it might be that it's restricted either to admins or admins that are also within the designer group. It really depends on the configuration of your setup. Because of the nature of this particular area of the system, it is very much recommended that you keep it restricted to a number of users who are very much across what your requirement is within the business. Now, with every Myosh system set up, there will always be a default set of notifications. Typically, those notifications will be across steps of the workflow. So if we think about incident reporting, for example, it will be when an incident is initially logged, a notification is triggered and is sent out to the supervisor of that particular incident. Likewise, as it progresses through various stages, it will go to the internal authorizer so that they are notified for reviewing an incident ready for sign-off and closure. So the example that we'll look at first of all is how to create an incident notification. And as you'll see, we've got quite a few in here that are probably not in your default system environment. So this one that we have is for any actual incident categories. In this case, we've gone for each of the different levels that you have in the risk matrix. So I'm going to replicate that very similar to what we have in here. Now, the first step with any notification is to actually create the content of it to begin with. That's all within the email templates. So when we click on email templates, it takes us to a screen where we have to select the target form. The target form in this instance is going to be your incident reporting form. And because we've got multiple forms within incident reporting, we'll just need to pick out the correct one from the list. Now, what we can see in the email template window is all of the existing templates that we have. So at any stage, I can double click onto one of those templates and I can review what content is in there and make any necessary changes. For our example though, we're focusing on creating an incident reporting notification for any actual incident categories that are 3 or 4. So let's go into new email template. And I'm just going to call this one a high potential incident. The subject line and the message body, they can both be customized however you feel needed. So you can have a combination of text that you're going to type in, but also fields that you're going to pull from within the corresponding record. Okay, so I might want to also have within the subject line which site that this refers to. So from this drop-down add variable screen, excuse me, what we're able to do is actually jump to any of the fields that we have within our form. You might even choose to have a brief description, or it could be simply you've got the date reported or date occurred. For our example, I'm going to go with brief description. What you need to be aware of when you're adding variables into the form is that it literally is going to pull through the content of that field. So in this case, we would see high potential incident, the actual site reference, and also the brief description. In this particular example, it is obvious to somebody who would receive that email template what that content would refer to. In some cases though, particularly when it gets to the message body, it's not always obvious. So we do recommend that you also place in just an annotation prior to placing in the variable so that the person knows exactly what it refers to. So particularly when you're using date fields, it wouldn't always be obvious which one it referred to. So just almost like a prefix, if you like. Just put that in. So I'm just going to very quickly pick out some obvious ones. And you can spend time aligning this and making it look a lot more professional. I'm just going to get some fields in here for today's exercise. Now, one important variable that you can add in, and it should be available within every single notification you have within your system already, is what's referred to as record link. And you can see that just in this option here. And that will enable the person who has the notification to be able to click onto the link and go directly to the corresponding record. However, that's gone in the completely wrong place, just excuse me. And you can see that it does take a little bit of time just to get everything aligned the way that you want it. Okay, so we've got the template name. This is going to be important for us in a moment when we actually start to build the notification, because we'll need to reference which template we want to link to the actual notification. So just be mindful of the template names that you give some notifications. We've got the subject, and then we've put in the main message body. So at this stage, we can now select save. And we can see our template in the list. Like I said, at any point you can go into any of those notifications that you have, and this is an example of a fairly typical notification format. So we've completed step 1, which is the email templates. The next step is the actual notification itself. So first example is new notification, select incident and select OK. So once again, we were just picking up the target form that is going to reference this notification. Typically, I see what happens is the actual template name and the notification name marry up with one another. On occasions, you may find that you're able to utilize multiple templates throughout different notifications. So you could maybe make that one template name a little bit more general. We've got 3 different notification types, and for this example that we're going through, first of all, we're going to focus on a triggered notification. Triggered notifications typically relate to something happening within the workflow or field that is going to trigger the notification being sent out. In the main part of this body of the editor window, what we're going to do now is select who the recipients of this notification will be. So by selecting add, I've got different ways I can add addresses in. So by default, it will go to the address source where you can type an external email. So even if somebody doesn't have access to Myosh, they can receive the notification. Obviously, if they choose to select the link, it's going to take them to a login page, so they won't be able to see the actual record itself. Other common options that you'll come across are selecting a person from the system. So this is going to point to your user list where you've got all of your employees. So you can simply go in and pick out multiple names if always these key people need to receive this notification. The field value from the record. This will give you a list of all available person fields that show within the current form. So I could have it so that for this notification, the reporting person, whoever that might be on each occasion, is going to receive it. If I want multiple field values from the record, I will need to select OK and then go back in and add additional people. You'll see at the bottom of this screen that we have the extra options. Essentially what this means is that in this instance, we can have it so that it just goes to the reporting person. There is the option to go to the reporting person's manager only. So this would be useful in, I suppose, notifications where you might need to escalate. And then finally, it can go to the reporting person and also their manager. For our example, we'll keep it as field only and go into the reporting person. Let's go back in. And in this case, I would imagine for a high potential incident, you would already have a key group of people who are set up. So it might be divisional managers, executive team, whatever you refer to them as in your company. For us for today, we'll just add in the admin group. And then we get to the reply to part. So because we're not able to reply back to any of these notifications, we'll just place in a no reply email reference. And you could do exactly the same for anybody who's just getting a copy to or a blind copy of this notification. The final step on the front page of the notification editor window is to select your template. So as we can see from the list, we have all of the available ones for the incident reporting. And that's the first step done. Now I'm actually going to just pause for a moment and see if there are any questions coming through. It's okay if there aren't, I'm just mindful that I've been chatting away for quite some time.
I can't see any, Catherine.
Okay, so we'll continue on. Next step is to review the actual conditions or properties. There's no particular order that you have to approach this in. I typically would go to the conditions first. Add field condition enables us to say, in this instance, for our example, we want it so that when an actual category is either 3 or 4, we want it to send that notification out. What we're seeing in this first drop down is all of the fields available within our form. So we could, if we really wanted to, have it so that if it's an injury and then build in additional conditions as well. But for this example, we'll just go with actual. So you'll see that you get the different levels from the risk matrix available. I'm going to choose category. Depending on the nature of your notification, you might find that you need to use other options available from this list, but we are going to go with contains. So we want when it contains the level 4. And I also want it to incorporate if it's a category 3 as well. This bottom part is important to be aware of. So for this example, and I do appreciate that there are so many variables with notifications, but for this particular example, matching any condition is the one that we're going to use because we want it to be for either a 3 or a 4. If I just remove this for 1 second, and if I also wanted to build in that it was a classification outcome of, let's just say, equipment, then it would be important for me to change that and go for match all conditions because it would need to be equipment and level 4. If I also wanted to incorporate the notification to be the same for level 3s, it's not going to work if I add the actual incident category level 3 in here because we don't want it to be, it's never going to be 3, 4 and equipment because they're just not, it's either one of those 2 categories. So what we would need to do to work around that is to build a completely separate notification to incorporate category 3s. So I'm just going to get mine back to where it was, and then I'll just address that question that's come through. Okay, so Silky, how do I stop sending notifications on incidents where we have made changes or reopened to edit? So you would need to look at the next step, which is our edit notification properties. That might address it. If not, we can get back to that one. So the final step would be to go into Edit Notification Properties. This is focusing on the delivery. So typically, most of our customers do just have it so that it goes to an email address. Some excuse me, some customers have it so that it will go to a push notification. And in some cases, that will need to be set up, is my understanding. So it might be that if you can email support, if you want it to go directly to a mobile phone, I'm pretty sure there's some kind of setup that needs to be activated. Apologies about the noise in the background. I hope that's not too distracting in this session. The triggering event that we're going to go for in this particular example is going to relate to the record being progressed in the workflow. That's what we want. However, the workflow step isn't on a closed record. It will be when the incident category is actually selected to open. So whenever we go in and define our incident and we choose the category from the risk matrix, usually when you select investigate, that's when it pushes it to an open report, which would then in turn trigger these notifications going out. Again, as with all Viking systems, there can often be slight configuration differences. So you might want to consider the workflow step that you would want this notification to go out. Just before we select OK to this, I would like to review some of the other options that you have. So this one specifically might refer to the question that's just been asked regarding the notifications that have been made changes to reopened or edit. So you might want to check your notifications and review them, because you could have a setting in there that's the triggered event. That's probably the most likely. So you just get rid of that. There is also the option to have it if a record is deleted. This would be if you share your system with many other admin users. You might want to just set notifications so that you're keeping track of what's happening in your system. And if we go for a date field, we can base it on a workflow step within the date and also which date field within your form that you want to reference it. Like I say, there are so many variables with these notifications, and it really does just depend upon what your requirements are for the notification. I'm going to take this back one step and go to open. And then what's going to happen is this will go out when it progresses to an open report. Before I select save to this particular example, I'm going to go back into the notifications and be aware that we also have in here the hierarchy conditions as well that we can add in. So again, in this particular example, if we did want to have it so that we referenced a particular site, would receive the notification. So let's say it was for Mount Bryant, I would be best to remove the variable options on actual incident category to just one. And in this case, it's going to go out when it's Mount Bryant and a category 4. So I would be very mindful of how you choose to set up conditions that have your hierarchy. For some business, I appreciate it is essential because of the sheer size. In those particular situations, it's going to be really important that the notification is referenced clearly, because the management of the notifications can get tricky, particularly if you're sending to individuals rather than values that you're pulling from the form, because it will require a little bit more of administration. Before I select save at this point, are there any further questions coming through?
Don't think so.
Okay, so we've selected save, and then what you'll see is we have our notification just in the main bar. Now, other types of notifications that you'll see are fairly typical will be notifications regarding expiry dates. So it might be within a register, it could relate to a training record within the scheduled renewal dates. So let's just open up this one. And what we'll see with these particular one is that it's a timed notification. So we've got a different notification type. And if we look at the properties for this one, we can see that it's going to trigger on a Monday. We've even got the ability now to actually specify the time zone that this is going to go. So it's going to go after 8 o'clock based on that time zone. The triggering event is going to be when this record is pushed to archived. We can have a look if there are any conditions, and as we'll see that currently this is completely blank. If we look at other data options as well that we have, so training records is probably a good one to review. So we can see for this one, it's a weekly summary of scheduled training. We've got it before the current date at evaluation time, so it's going to be prior to the scheduled renewal date. If we look at the properties for this notification, again, it's going to go on a Monday, gives us the time zone, and it also gives us the triggered workflow steps. So it's anything that's in a scheduled status. So what we've covered so far is the actual creation of an email template, and you also know how you can go in and review those templates. We've also gone through the actual creation of a notification that is triggered based upon conditions within the form. You'll now be aware that you can also use your notification properties for different triggered events. And I suppose it's really just the crux of it with notifications in the system is understanding exactly what you're wanting to achieve initially, and then just building that in. Just try and keep them as simple as possible. You find that sometimes businesses that have many notifications that get sent out, it often has the adverse effect of users paying attention to them. So just keep that in mind. Do we have any other questions that are coming through?
No.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I appreciate all of your time today, and thank you for joining the session.
Okay, thank you, Catherine, for that. That's great. And we'll send an email today with links to upcoming training and webinars that are coming up for industry topics as well today. So, and a recording of this session. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.